everyone's been, capitalizing on this as far as the news goes. I know ABC News has been going above and beyond with covering this, and I think it's getting a little clickbaity, if you ask me. Exploitative, at this point, the parent company of A&E Networks is Disney. Like, haven't they made enough of this? I think. But my personal reaction to the documentary is like,
all right, we are back at it. Hashtag randomly with Ronnie Jr. With Grant of Grants Rants. Your podcast, man, went for years. Like, dare I say 7 years?
Yeah, 7 years. Yeah.
So you really have a perspective from that space, and also working in the business. You know what I mean? You've worked at all the big companies, so you kind of see it from all those sides. So this is not just a conversation of like, either I love Wendy Williams or Wendy is an icon because of this or this. You actually do work within the business. So I feel like your perspective is kind of interesting. I've
been talent facing for a while, so to see this is very interesting from like this perspective, and also as a Wendy watcher.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you one thing? Because there's going to be all kinds of comments, and I will say, let me just say real quick, this is a quicker episode. We all know Randomly Ronnie Jr. can talk, but it's a quicker episode. And I got to say, if you're viewing and you're like not satisfied with what we bring to the table, I got to tell you, I am channeling my inner, we have to get this done mentality, like the moment. And I know it was probably a deeper situation, so I'm not making light of it. But when Wendy Williams walked in with the coat, a pack of Newports, and it was like live at 10 a.m. I feel like while that was probably a very difficult situation, so I'm not making light, it's interesting because we are all in spaces where we're doing so many different things, Grant, myself, and sometimes it's like, we just got to get the show done. So I think I kind of channeled in on that. I'm not saying I'm a broken person, but today wasn't my day, Grant, but I was happy that you wanted to talk Wendy with me. And we'll get to the documentary here. I imagine you watched the other two. When we think of this third one, we'll get into the meat and the potatoes here. How much of an impact did Wendy play on your 7 years with Grants Rants? When you incepted your own podcast, was there something there that led you to do that on the basis of, you enjoyed her work as well? Was there an inspiration from Wendy?
I never really thought about her as an inspiration for myself. I'm sure to a degree, absolutely, of being able to feel empowered to say what I wanted to say and call people out at the time, which I still definitely do in my real life. To say it like immediate mentality, I've always tried to be very authentic. I really know no other way. So I guess I can relate to her in that aspect. But for me, Wendy was more of an escape. I would watch her on lunch. I would watch her in between work, in between meetings. They would release her show on YouTube. So to me, she was very important to just my my media consumption and kind of striking a balance. And I miss that to this day where, I'm coming off of meetings or long days and I don't want to know anything heavy. I just want to hear someone talk. And there's a void for sure in my viewing habits of just hearing someone talk. And man, could she talk nonstop. I mean, this woman did a live 20-minute segment from top to bottom herself on camera, live TV, 5 days a week. I don't know many people that can do that.
Yeah. And it is that there was something that you certainly were fed daily. It was exciting. We all have our reasons that we came to enjoy her show, and we'll talk about Where is Wendy Williams, the documentary, in a second. And yes, we do have to be critical of sorts, and ask all the questions. But just as we were talking with Grant about what was his reason for loving the work of Wendy Williams, it's for me, I got to look at I come from the radio world. The radio world has always been very special to me. So knowing, and even how you stated a second ago, Wendy for sure did a 20-minute straight to camera right by herself on the purple chair. It isn't necessarily something that everyone could do. And my standpoint, or where I get the excitement, is that, I always feel, and it is a bias, is that radio talent is really something special. It's because it's what I've done for so many years. So that's where I come into it. My first question is, where is your reaction with the documentary? Where is Wendy Williams? Because a lot of was being said, there was aspects of it wasn't an exploitive documentary. You don't necessarily have to answer that, but do
Oh,
you where
yeah.
yeah, where do you feel? Because I know her niece was on The View, and there's information being released about dementia kind of in right before. Where do you stand with all that? Because it's hard to watch for sure.
Yeah, at this point in the post viewing process, the documentarians have given interviews. Wendy's best friend Regina has spoken out against
Hmm.
the documentary a little bit. So we've seen now at this point, the post kind of 48 hours fallout. Everyone's been capitalizing on this as far as the news goes. I know ABC News has been going above and beyond with covering this, and I think it's getting a little clickbaity, if you ask me. Exploitative, at this point, the parent company of A&E Networks is Disney. Like, haven't they made enough of this? I think. But my personal reaction to the documentary is I think it served the purpose that it was intended to have. It ended in a hopeful place, and I've been telling people this, and this isn't a spoiler. It's a very raw documentary, and I'm glad they didn't sugarcoat it. I thought maybe because of the Disney tie-in and its lifetime, and it's I thought it would be a little bit more kind of smoothed around the edges. Not the case, and I respect it a lot more for that. I don't find it to be distasteful. I find it to be very real, too
Hmm.
real in certain places. But I think that's what has to happen if the intention is to get the court to re-examine this guardianship.
Hmm.
I wonder where Wendy's head is at with this. They're telling us she's in a better place. We haven't seen her, so I
Hmm.
don't know. But I wonder if she said, "Look, let roll the tapes, play everything back. I'm going to own it because I'm going to say, this is what my life is under a guardianship." And I'm
Mm.
wondering if she's just saying, like, I'm going to have to eat what for this, but I'm
Yeah.
going to use this as a tool to be able to get out of this. And I think if there's a strategy there, I have a lot of respect for it.
You think there's a little bit of a strategy with all of this? I mean, what was the thoughts of like releasing the information that she has dementia going so close into the documentary? Is this all
Well,
strategic to some degree, maybe?
the Guardian had no choice because this documentary was coming out, and it was in the documentary, and the Guardian had petitioned for this in the court to not air, and
Hmm.
the court said, based on, like, this, that you're going to be able to have freedom of speech,
Hmm.
so they allowed it, and I think that's why I think it was like up to the very last second that
Hmm.
they tried to withhold this. And then they can also use this as a tool on their side to say, well, look, we didn't want to reveal this information. The family did.
Hmm.
Now they're capitalizing on that, which I don't necessarily agree with. I happen to really like Alex. I thought she was a great spokesperson for
Right.
Wendy. I think she was a great advocate. But there's a lot of money on the table here. So I bet the Guardian is going to fight dirty on this. And they are a lawyer. They're a
Yeah.
lawyer. So they're gonna have all the tools, all the language, and the loopholes that Wendy's family is just not equipped to, they just don't have this information. But they need to lawyer up.
Yeah, I want to shift gears in a moment just to talk about a couple, because I don't want it to be nothing but a frustration, in terms of our reaction, because it was a hard documentary to watch. I want to ask you some of the moments that really made Wendy amazing to you, but I do
Sure.
want to get into in a second. This is just as a little tease. I want to know what you know in the world of like the conservatorship and stuff of that nature, because you were on the ground running, so to speak, with following very early on Britney Spears situation. And while it's not the same, let's table that because I do want to hear how it compares, just as a like, somebody viewing how we could understand how this is similar or not similar. So we'll table that. Give me something that gives you optimism. Do you think Wendy gets out of the situation? You said that you watched it and at the end there was some hope. I feel like there might be hope, but there also has to be that moment where you feel like, is she too far gone? Like, it's a really hard situation. You feel like there's hope for her to get back to something or no?
I think there's hope of her family being put in place of her guardianship, only because in the state of New York, what I learned from watching this documentary was that this is up for review yearly, which is important. However, when these people are paid, these guardians are paid, they have no financial incentive to say, okay, I'm no longer needed. Thank you. Also, there was a lawsuit that this guardian, it was allegedly taking money from someone else. So there's something you got to squint here a little bit. But to answer your question, do I think there's a future for Wendy outside of this? I unfortunately don't. I am not a medical professional, but I don't see where they're going to get as this is business 101, but just the insurance on her. We saw what happened with Debmar Mercury with her talk show. I just don't know how you green light a contract and put money behind something at this point. I wish it was different.
The hardest portion for me to watch was the excitement she had when she flew out to LA and she was like, yes, we're getting a talk show, and being so in a space and seeing joy, but not seeing the same Wendy Williams we've seen all those years. I think that to me was one of the hardest issues to watch, and not even in the basis of her manager and then the publicist and sort of everybody's kind of got their hand in the situation, but and that's always going to be an issue. But just overall, to see somebody with the joy but not knowing really how to get to the other side of it, like I got excited because I'm like, yeah, if she can do it. I'm being naive, Grant. I'm hoping for the best. Can I ask you a question? Again, we'll do more like comparative to Brittany in a second, but when people say, and I usually don't do topics that are like people say this and we react to it, but when like people do say, yeah, I hate that comment. I don't like it. It's more like say it with your chest and say, this is what I think. Anyways, but this is a big one because there is a common, I don't know how people reacted to this documentary or even the first two, but people do state, listen, when you create what you've created, there is a karma that does come through. That to me sounds so tough because it is kicking you when you're down, but it's also to be said that while she was on her rise, maybe there were some similarities in the way she might have conveyed that broadcast.
We all know that Whitney phone call, that infamous
Wendy. and Total, the group, they were ready to, mop it up real quick. I mean, so it's hard to say karma is what created this. What is your view on such a complicated situation?
That thought definitely crossed my mind. I don't know. That's up to the universe to decide, but I was glad that it was mentioned in the documentary. They did voice that, and there are people that are going to watch that documentary that are going to think that. I can name other names of people she went after, and perhaps they deserved it, Diddy and all those folks. But I don't. It's a tough one to say.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing to be like, for you to almost expect somebody's demise based on karma. I don't think it's karma per se. I think every action sort of has a reaction, and sort of if you go down a certain route, maybe certain things happen. So I don't really feel like it's karma per se, but it's definitely sad.
I want to add that I believe it's a story of an addict. It sounds to me, the way it was presented, that she was a closet alcoholic, and the addiction completely took her over. So where karma fits into all that, I don't know, and I'm not saying it. Who the hell knows? But it's a sad story, and it's who knew that someone that was in the purple chair on the couch talking with so many people, having this huge career, was so lonely. And you really don't know what's happening with people. It's a miracle. She did a live show 5 days a week for, I believe it was 14 years. And she suffered with this, and she showed up to work and did the thing. And we know, Wendy watchers know, the last couple of years were rough. There was a lot going on, but she made it out there. And that's incredible.
Well, that's the hard thing is there was a lot of great joy she brought. And I know that nowadays things have changed so much. Like when she did what she did, it was a little bit of a trailblazer situation. Not that she's the only radio person to ever do what she did and transition to TV. It is all wonderful. But the funny thing is now you don't bat an eye and, somebody's saying something and it's controversial and, you sort of make your bones off being controversial. Wendy sort of was an original when it comes to some of those things. So it was probably lonely even within that. But what I always say is just me, I don't think she was just that. I know that's how we perceive her as like some of these more shady moments, but I think she actually, and this is my radio side, she was actually an amazing broadcaster. She was actually really good at this. And she talks about being 6 years old and, always wanting this. And, we've seen the other documentaries on Lifetime where she talks about navigating to become, this big figure in New York City radio of that time. So I don't want to wash it off like it is now, where it's like, overnight somebody says something, outlandish on TikTok and they're a star tomorrow. Like it's not that. Wendy was not the longevity she had does not equate this other element that sometimes happens now. There's a reason she wasn't here today, gone tomorrow. There's a reason, even despite all those things, she had, like you said, 14 years of a talk show. And the talk show was different. It broke a lot of barriers.
Yep.
I mean, at the time, who did what she did?
And who's doing it now? There's a hole there. And I know that Sherry has replaced her time slot, but it's not the same show.
Oh, please.
I don't look at it. I've had a lot to say with Sherry Shepherd.
Sherry Shepherd.
Show for a long time.
Gosh.
The reality is, like, to what you're saying, and to her credit of being so authentic and raw and keeping it, those hot topics rolling. No one on television is doing that. There's a lot of YouTubers. There's a lot of people who are following in her footsteps of using similar kind of tactics. But as far as television goes, no one has replaced Wendy on television. You don't have the same voice that is going to stir the pot, that is going to say it direct into the camera.
Right.
And she was messy. Yeah. And you've got a lot of people who are really safe. And that's what was so refreshing about it. And it has not been duplicated.
Grant of Grants Rants, I say still check out the podcast, because though he's not currently doing it, it is available on YouTube and all the streaming platforms. Go check it out, because he's got a huge library and he definitely knows what he's talking about, because not only does he work for the big companies, but he's done it on his own as well. So there is something there that connects him to having really, really great commentary about these types of things. What do you think of, we'll wrap up here in a minute, just a quick episode, because it was such a captivating 4-part documentary. Like, my gosh, I feel
yeah.
Oh, do you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I wanted to mention a couple different things about that manager, the publicist. I'm trying to figure out like where they're at now. That publicist is actually speaking out about this documentary, and she's twisting it. She's blaming the documentarians and the network. No accountability for herself and her actions on the show. Looking over her shoulder, watching Wendy drink alcohol minutes before they leave to go to a meeting, which was a trip for me, because they were going to a building that I used to work in, and like going into the parking garage. It was just very close to home for me.
Oh, right. Was that Universal City or was that Burbank?
Yeah, Universal City.
Yeah.
It was like, damn it. And to hear about the meeting afterwards, and just from a business perspective, how do you bring someone into a meeting like that? It's just really sad. And the only thing you can do to justify this documentary is say, this is what happens when someone is under the care of somebody else that they shouldn't be under. And for that, I get the point. But bottom line is, this was like a 4-part series. There was a lot. I don't know if we needed to see all this to be able to make that point.
Right. We got the point pretty early on.
It was hard to watch. I mean,
okay. So can I ask you the question?
Yeah.
The toughest one? Like, so there's a lot of talk, in terms of the people who created the documentary and the network itself, Lifetime, that like, oh, it was planned to be this, a comeback story. Mind you, this is not a PBS documentary.
Right.
I find it very hard to believe the network and the documentary, the creators, had no idea what was in front of them. The notion that, because I think the way it was like written publicity wise was like, oh, we were filming a wonderful comeback story of Wendy Williams, and we found out shortly it wasn't that. I just don't know that I buy that at all, Grant.
I watched for that because I said, okay, they're going to talk about the podcast that everybody wanted. They're going to, show the photo shoot. They're going to talk about plans for the future. That all was within like the first like 30 minutes. Then after that, it just like went off the rails. So I was like, okay, so I thought they would have more of that to set up if that's what the intention was. We had heard about this for a while. It was originally reported that Wendy was filming a reality show. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, I wonder who picked that up. Like a reality show about what? Like the idea of her being well enough to do that was like, no one really believed it to begin with. So I was like, who's doing this? I thought they were doing like maybe a sizzle reel, but this was in and out
exactly
of the reel for a while.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't know this was a documentary. So the documentary kind of burned through all that quite quickly and then got to it. It went on for a while. I think if we're going to this, maybe this is not fair for me to say, but if you're going to look at the documentarians, you got to look at Lifetime. They're getting dailies. They know what's up. These people are talking. They've got to have, I don't know, a weekly, bi-weekly meeting. I don't know, but they know what's up, and they kept going with it.
Yeah.
It made for a great 2-night event. It was very insightful. I've never seen a celebrity documentary like this. I just hope that it's all worth it.
Yeah. And it was even in the vein of Wendy. Wendy was always such a person who shared, even though this was a little cringe and really tough to watch, it still felt very much in line with everything we've always gotten from her. But yeah, I don't believe for a second that, because again, it wasn't a little PBS special. It was, who's doing a TV show about a comeback of when, like, that's just not making air, unfortunately. I don't think. I really feel like they knew what they knew what it was. And to save face and to, speak on it now, yes, you have to cover your behind and say, we had no idea this, materialized. But I'm like, timeline wise, it kind of felt like we did know what was happening. So that's the part that I'm like, not saying it's exploitive, but I feel like everyone kind of knew what was going on, right?
I get your point, because I'm like, okay, so they put the cameras down, we were told, when they found out about the dementia diagnosis. But they kept the cameras up when she was clearly battling alcoholism in an extreme way. So I'm not saying what's the difference, but what's the difference? It's still someone who's impaired, and it's not necessarily showing that, talent in the best way. I don't know. Wendy is an executive producer on this documentary, but yet I've never heard of an executive producer not seeing the final cut and signing off on it. I know she's incapacitated, but like, this is a whole thing with a 3-picture deal and legal, and this is an extreme case.
I'm also really interested to know, obviously they probably can't speak about it publicly, but when there was the viewing from the family of this 4-part documentary, whereas Wendy Williams, how they just received it on a human level, not even on like a business side, like what that must have been like to watch this thing. I don't know if maybe they're taking to Twitter now and having opinions, but that cannot be easy. Just can't be easy. Like I said, there's no right answer for any of these questions. Like I feel like this was even, I'm glad Grant, with all his experience in mind within radio, we're able to do this, but like, there's no easy answer, because you don't want to think of, obviously you want to think of the best, which seems so not necessarily hopeful, but you also got to be aware of what the worst can be. And you just hope it doesn't go to that route, but this was not a fun watch. It was a very difficult watch.
Yeah, and I thought it was very low class for Sunny Hostin to talk about this more than twice.
Famously, Grant is not the biggest fan of The View. I think at one point you used to be, and now
no, I was always a hate watch. But I mean, I still can't look away.
Wait, what did Sunny do? I love Sunny.
Oh, I have nothing positive to say.
Say it like you mean it.
She said that she, watched the documentary with Wendy's niece, and then she repeated it again the next day. We get it. It's too much clout chasing. I don't know why she feels as though she has to have this like special screener with the family. Like she claims they were good friends. I don't remember Wendy talking about Sunny that much. And if she was a good friend, she wasn't really in the picture. And I know it's not really her fault, but she wasn't really in the picture for a while. But I just don't know that. I don't understand why she had to speak like she was almost like a representative.
Well, she did say on The View that she was a long-term, like she was like the legal analyst on her radio show years ago. So I maybe she's coming from that place
20
of like
years ago.
Yeah, but granted, like I've known you for over 10 years. Like if I always will have a perspective to back my friend, 10 years from now. So
it just seems like she hitched her wagon to it. I don't know. No, she's like part of this ABC Disney family. So if she was contributing to the documentary, and which I actually would have really enjoyed or respected. They had someone who was able, a guardianship specialist, to speak about this. But I mean, if we could hear more about the legal implications, which I think is so important, if the idea of this is to spread awareness about guardianships, then I can understand her involvement, her direct involvement.
Interesting.
I just don't
well, and we'll get to the last topic here and we'll wrap up because it is time to go. But but by the way, if you want to support, patreon.com/RandomlyRonnieJr. Actually, let's run a little commercial for just 1 second, how you could support Randomly Ronnie Jr. because he's working. Mark, take it away.
Well, hello there. Thank you for watching and supporting the show with my good friend, Randomly Ronnie Jr. Who the hell am I? Great question. My name is Mark Rodriguez with Mastermind Media, and I wanted to take just a moment of your time to let you know about all the other incredible things this guy, Randomly Ronnie Jr. has going on. But first, before we get into that, please comment, like, and subscribe. That is how he grows here on these channels. But one channel you probably don't know about is patreon.com/RandomlyRonnieJr, where he's got a bunch more exclusive content. So please check that out. But speaking of YouTube, let's go back to YouTube for a second. He's got this hashtag randomly with Ronnie Jr. and it shows all of his stuff in his days in radio from back in the day, all the way up to present day, and his new interviews, podcasts, just videos across the board. So please check that out, because when you think about content creators, there's millions of content creators, but there's only one, Randomly Ronnie Jr. Let's get back into the show.
Wise man. Thank you, Mark. Grant, so we're going to wrap it up. Here is the fun question, and then we'll get right into the tougher things and we'll be done.
Okay.
So this is just interesting to me. So while like I got excited there, like Patreon support, independent creator, you get the leverage of doing things, say it like you mean it, but how you want to do it. When you're in a bigger landscape like the network, etc., you have to present a 4-part or two-part 4-part series documentary like this was Saturday and Sunday, whereas Wendy Williams, but you have to do it where it's so captivating because the bottom line is the bottom line. So my question to you is, would anyone have been watching if this was simply, it would have went the other way and it was simply a comeback, Wendy's back documentary? Are we more rushing to our television and commenting on it on Twitter because of the mess? And if we are, what does that say just about everybody? Because that's something to really think about. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think, Grant?
That would be more of like a commercialized, I don't know, it wouldn't need 4 parts. It would feel like, her big deal was that she was going to get a big podcast deal. So like, okay, that's not exactly very visual. I don't think that there would be much to that, but yeah, this was it was a spectacle in many different ways, but the intention, if you're gonna watch to the end, to see what that intention was, but it does kind of flip, and I think the documentary did a good job of just kind of presenting what the reality was. We were introduced to the manager and the publicist. Then we saw that maybe things were off. Then we saw things were very off. Then we saw where the family came in. They laid it out really well. So that warranted 4 parts. I don't imagine anything else would.
That is pretty crazy that the son's apartment is 80,000. That's like, wow.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, imagine to
Jeez.
be like 22 years old. Like, I mean, whoa,
Yeah.
and
Nobody
wow.
needs that. Nobody needs that, especially
I
as a
mean, maybe
single
you
young
need it
guy.
if you were like, you know, in your 30s or 40s and you've created something, but just like you know, we all know what it's like starting off life, you know, 18,
Yeah.
19, 20, and like going for your dreams or whatever it is. But like, that is a very interesting fun fact. I believe the cousin mentioned that. But anyways, you know, you want what's best. Can you give me any last minute thoughts on like just what you've learned, and what even your involvement was when you were very in support of the Britney Spears, all of that situation, and what you've learned, and how does it or does it even coincide with what Wendy Williams is going through right now? Because that's
Well,
a
yeah.
little over my head, or it's just sad, man. It really is.
What I've learned is guardianships are easy to get into and impossible to get out of, it seems, because they say, I believe the statistic is 90% of people who get into these guardianships, conservatorships, it's labeled differently by the state. They stay in the 90% of these people. So it's really tough. I think that they are necessary in the sense of you need to have a hybrid model where there has to be an outside advocate that is watching this very closely and not just the court system. I mean, in the case of Wendy, her family doesn't even know where she is. They don't know what she's eating, you know, what state she's in, I imagine. Like, that's ridiculous. She's got a family. It's not like it's not like they're exploiting her like the Spears. You know, it's different. And then
Mm.
Brittany could have used someone, a real watchful eye to watch the parents. You know, and there's really no one size fits all approach, and nor should there be. And I think that this is a big problem, especially in this country. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I question now a lot about Brittany. She's been out of this conservatorship for a long time. You know, I worship the grounds, but at the same time, she has not given a public interview. She wrote a book. She did, you know, there was no book tour. She's, you know, dancing on Instagram. We don't hear her, you know, we don't hear her interacting. She's not on Drew Barrymore. She's not doing like a pre-taped interview, even like when she used to do them on Ellen. The silence makes me question a lot. And with Wendy, there was a lot of silence for a while. There were just rumors of a comeback. You know, we knew that she was in and out of these facilities, but we didn't know what we know now. And when things are quiet, that makes me nervous. So I don't know. It's none of my business, but I'm just saying that there's it's concerning. And Wendy released a statement after the announcement of the dementia. How do we know that's her statement is hers? How do we really know? So I think you have to take a lot of this with a grain of salt to just know our place, that, you know, we really don't know. We don't really need to know. And I just kind of want to let it live, but I am rooting for her family and especially for her sister to be the guardian.
Yeah, that's a healthy place. You could be in support of hoping for the best within the situation, but knowing that it's a tougher road. I think that's actually really good. Usually when I do a podcast, I'm very like, this is what I think, and I'm so like, you know, not saying I'm never wrong, but I always feel very like I'm never wrong. But this time,
Yeah.
it's, to me, it is complicated, and it's radio.
Well,
It's
there's a
the
lot
thing.
we don't know. There's a lot
We
we
don't know.
really don't know
What?
about this.
Okay,
So
in terms of like, yes, getting a dementia diagnosis is one thing, but like in referring to The View, we talked about The View. I think it was said on The
yeah.
View, like saying it was a lot at one time. It was the show essentially being canceled on the basis of what had happened, but you know, pandemic, slowing things down, being isolated, divorce. Do you think there was anything that could have, like looking back, was there something that could have helped her along this journey a little bit better? You know, so it didn't end up the way it ended up. What would have needed to be done when things were better, I guess?
She needed more people in her inner circle in New York, in
The
her
right people.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just needed the right people. It didn't help that she was isolated like that. And a lot of it seems that she was self-isolating, and that goes back to the addiction issues.
Yeah.
But she really, I mean, her sister should be her, you know, there for her now. And it's just, you know, it's just kind of how it shook out. I don't blame the sister, but I
Yeah.
wonder how things would have been different if that sister was right there for her. And you mentioned all the different things that have happened in her life. This documentary, I have one critical note about this that I wanted to voice on this podcast.
Okay, lifetime and documentary filmmakers. Here we go. Grant's going to say it like he means it. He's going to say it. Let's throw you a little close up real quick. There we go. Say it like you mean it.
The timeline of this documentary was a mess. You didn't put dates up. We don't know where we were at what time, what was, recorded before. We know what happened after the LA trip, which was a mess, but like the dates were cutting to interviews with her son, her nephew, her niece. They're in the same clothes in one, then totally different a moment later. I want to know the timeline of when these things were recorded because people learn different information. Wendy's mental state had changed over the course of this. We started recording. I had nothing to do with it. They started this documentary in the early 22 or early 2022, and it went to more recent. So like that's a long time, and there's a lot that's happened. I needed to know where we were and when, because it got very muddled for me. And there's a lot, again, you want to know the timeline. I want to know the months, the dates, how many days it's been. When did we hear from Wendy last? It's just too much. And even in the end, we haven't seen Wendy a long time. Well, what does a long time mean? So I just needed to know more of that. A little bit more signposting would have made this a better documentary.
What do you mean
signposting?
What is it? What do you mean?
That means like, we're here, now we're here. It allows the viewer to kind of follow along closely because so many of us want to know so much information. There's a lot being thrown at us. I want to know where we are at this space and time.
Yeah. I want to know how many liberties were taken in terms of all the slates we saw. Because, it was a lot of, just a slate saying this, and those were the ways to sort of connect the dots in terms of the visual. And, as I've told you before, Grant, I worked at American Latino TV for about 12 seasons. And so we would take 20-minute if it was me, I did hour interviews, but we would condense them to 4 minutes. Luckily, that show was on the basis of uplifting stories, which was so good for me because it's what I love to do more than anything. But I also know that if you get busy with different instrumentals and different ways you run bites together, you can almost tell a different story. So when I saw too many slates, I was like, wait a minute. Like,
that's a good point.
It would even make more sense if you would have had whoever was there, Regina, DJ Booth, like whoever, like I would have trusted it. Not saying I didn't trust the documentary, but I would have felt it more connection wise if it would have been vocally stated by the talent, not written out. When you do the written out slate, which is like the black screen with the writing, somebody who's been around footage for such a long time. Obviously, I didn't work just in radio. I worked, like I said, American Latino, and I mean, I could almost make a good story. A 4-minute vignette was what we did for the show, American Latino TV and Latin Nation for, like I said, a long time. I can make a good story almost bad based on how I convey it. So I just didn't love that. That was just, that was my note.
Yeah. Show, don't tell. I agree. There were a lot of those. I mean, when I have to like read, I've always got a little anxiety because, it comes up fast. So there was a lot of that, but it does keep the viewer engaged. And I mean, I was engaged, in this documentary.
Do you have any last thoughts? The reason, Grant, it's passionate to me, it's broadcast. It really is one of my first loves. So anytime, like I said, it could be you, like it could be, obviously we don't want you to go through a situation, but it could be like, I knew Grant, 10 years ago, and now 10 years later, he becomes, the replacement on CBS talk show. And like, certain things happen. Like I just have such a fascination. Did you see I just manifested you to a talk show? I'm just saying I have such a
I'll do it at this point. What do you want?
I have such a fascination for this as a craft. So when anyone within the broadcast space goes through it, like I said, I usually do these episodes and I say, this is what I think. This one, when it comes to broadcast, I lay back a little bit because I do care so much about what it takes. I know what it takes. I've been in it for a long time and it's hard. So when you see one of your own, so to speak, I don't know Wendy Williams for nothing, but when you see somebody who does what you loved, and that when she was a 6-year-old, as it said in the documentary, she loved this. As I remember growing up, feeling very isolated to the experience of what I wanted to do in life, and would get the roll of toilet paper and put it up and be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as if I was on an episode of TRL or a late night show or something. It just makes me have a sympathy that maybe I shouldn't have that much of a bias, that I'm rooting for Wendy because she's done a lot of things that, you know, we think of the Method Man call out was really one of the difficult things in terms of her radio show years ago. That was a very difficult one. So a lot of people will say karma, you know, but that's where I struggle. That's honest, Grant. That's honest. That's how I feel. How do you feel in your last thoughts? And we'll end.
Last thoughts are I would like to believe, and I'm being very naive in this, I would like to believe that she would be able to do some version of a podcast before she really is unable to. And I don't think that's going to happen, but I would just like to hear her voice again in the space one last time at least, and say, you know what, like, this was intentional. This documentary was to help me get to a better place legally. And I hope she gets her money back and she's able to just like be. So that's my hope for her. I mean, I'm a creative, so I want to see creatives do what they have to do, and because we have to do this, right? I mean, you get it. You know, we have to do this. This is like a calling, and Wendy clearly has hers. So just in her spirit, I hope that she's able to do this one more time, even in a small way. But I don't know if I don't know her. I don't know where she's at, quite literally. I thought DJ Booth came off really smart in the documentary. He knew when enough was enough. It's too bad because I know that I believe they had a falling out, but we now know that, you know, he was just really looking out for her. Yeah, her show was a great show. I hated the way it ended. You know, she didn't really get a chance to have a send off. And I think I need a little bit more closure from her, but I don't think I'm ever going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have a little bit of a bias just because we love the work for the most part. And there was so many funny moments, the Omarosa moment, she is the moment. Like, there's a lot that we can take from it. And as being so close, like, I don't know that I would have this feeling if I was in a different industry or whatever, or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm feeling it because it's what I love, you know, and you don't want to see anybody fall the way that she's fallen. And yeah, hopefully she could come back in some type of capacity that's very limited. But you mentioned a thing of like, it's a thing that is a calling to you. Like, you have to do this. You want to do this. And that's why the hardest scene, I won't say the hardest, but one of the harder scenes was when she was in LA. And like you said, you recognize those freeways. You're like, that's the 134. I used to live in Studio City. Like, you feel it. And knowing how bad she was doing, but that like almost like naive, I don't know if it was naive because if she was going through things, but that like, but I just want to show like that.
Yeah, you didn't want to see her fall on her face. You didn't want to witness that, you know?
Yeah.
You didn't want to know that she was walking into an executive meeting. You like that, you know, I don't know. No one wants to see that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a hard watch. That was a hard moment, especially because like we were saying, you know what it's like when this is your being, this is your career.
Yeah.
And that's how you present yourself after all these years of the success that she's had. And that's your moment. That's tough. That's tough to bear witness to as a creative.
Yeah. Well, Grant, I manifested that you're going to take over the CBS late night show that is now, I think, Taylor Tomlinson, and it's like a game show. Like, the disrespect. Yeah, they didn't replace what's his name? Who's our? Yeah, they made it a talk show, or not a talk show, a game show. I want old school talk shows back. I want radio talent to succeed, and enough with these games. It's like when you watch, I don't mind Eddie Cohen, Watch What Happens Live, but the games, I don't like the games. Let's have some conversations. It's just what I think. I know you might think otherwise.
Not really. Yeah, I mean, chat. But I mean, I can't watch Fallon anymore. It's like, who's going to eat a hot tamale and, you know, puke in a cup and guess who's behind your screen. I don't want to guess who's behind your screen. I would like to hear Joan Rivers interview someone with real talent.
Yes. I mean,
I'm like an odd duck.
We're supposed but we are supposed to play to the top of our intelligence. You know what I mean? In a silly game, like, come on, we got. But that's why
smart television. I really miss smart TV.
That is why there are sometimes, I'm not saying this is the best podcast ever. Grant and I both said we're going to run this through really quickly, and we both were kind of in chaos. And here we are.
Always.
You wouldn't know the wiser because, we gave it up and we did a good job. Yes, we did. Thank you very much. But it's like the one good thing is that podcasts and these platforms do offer that. So I'm hoping that we did a good job. I tried my best, like I said, and usually every other time I hit the microphone, it's like, this is what I think. Boom. This one was a little tougher. I'm not like staunchly like, this is what it is. I'm like, this sucks. This sucks for a lot of reasons. It sucks for the history of her show, her health, karma.
Her legacy is going, I mean,
it's
the memes.
Like, yeah.
This is going to be a big part of her legacy.
Yeah. And who would have knew, what's that girl's name? Angela. What's her name? She made the podcast. I mean, the documentary. What's her name? Angela.
Oh, the one that you don't like?
Oh, no, I don't care for her. I don't even know nothing about her. The girl who had the baby with Rob Kardashian. What's her name?
Oh, I thought you were making an Angela Yee reference.
Oh, no. No, I'm saying Black China made
China,
I think that's her name, Angela. Yeah, she made the documentary. Who would have knew? This whole thing was chaotic. Grant, thank you for spending some time talking to me about it, and best wishes to all the parties involved. Difficult situation, but I'm glad I had my dear friend GrantsRants talk with me a little bit. We have known each other for at least 10 years. At least 10 years.
Yeah.
So
at least.
Any last words other than that? I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I'm just so glad I get to talk long form about this. I put some Instagram stories up just to kind of like have a little bit of I need to talk to someone about this moment. But this was really great because I got to expand on my thoughts and really let the documentary resonate. And now I feel like this is a nice period at the end of that sentence, because that was a tough documentary, and I'm glad that I could, kind of put it to bed now for now.
Don't get me started on how much I don't like the shorts and the reels and the TikToks. Let me give you all this information in 35 seconds. The FUCK are you talking about? No, I'm a long form content creator. Thank you. And I'm good at it. All right, it's time to go. Go support my Patreon, support GrantsRants. Maybe it'll come back one day, and maybe he will be the CBS late night talk show host, because I just manifested it, and I've manifested much of success for some of my friends. So we'll see what happens.
Follow me on Instagram if you want. So,
all right, Grant. I'll talk to you.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.